boys and girls, it's Mrs. Laz-Art. Before we do anything art, I just want to take this opportunity to let you know that I have missed having you coming into my class all of these weeks, and I really appreciate the opportunity to say hello to you at this point. So, if you looked up our worksheet, you'll see that we are going to talk about Beatrix Potter today. A lot of people do not realize that Beatrix Potter was not just an artist. Beatrix Potter was also a scientist, and she was a really good scientist. She actually she lived during a time that's known as the Victorian era, and women were not encouraged to work outside of the home whatsoever. And she actually discovered something called symbiosis by studying lichens growing on trees. And she discovered that those lichens were actually made of two different organisms, and that the two organisms benefited from each other. And I'm sure that you've heard of this concept. If you haven't, you will probably by the time you leave elementary school. But because she was female, she was never allowed to present her idea, and her idea was not given any serious consideration by her peers. And when she finally was able to get a man, her uncle, to vouch for her, and she was able to have a presentation for the Scientific Society of England, she was not allowed to present her scientific, I almost said artwork. She wasn't allowed to present all of her scientific knowledge. And that's a very old way of being so, and that's why Beatrix Potter is not known as a scientist. Eventually she did become an author. And does anybody know any of the books that Beatrix Potter wrote? I'll give you a little time to think of it. How many of us knew that she wrote Peter Rabbit, and she wrote that entire series of books, and she also illustrated them? She was a great artist. Awesome. So what we're going to do today is something based in a field of science called phenology. Phenology is actually it's studying the way that plants grow. And Beatrix Potter's artwork and her studies of naturalism in her area, her phenology notebooks, are still the most complete record to this day of any scientist, any naturalist who has ever noted the phenology of any area in the world. So here are the directions for our phenology chart that we're going to be making. We're going to start with a piece of paper, and we're going to make a hamburger fold. A hamburger fold makes the paper kind of like a greeting card would be. Oh, by the way, I always do this in first grade, and I know it's the end of the year, but I'll review. The way we fold a piece of paper, we line up those corners, and we run our hand down the opposite end. So that's our hamburger fold. We're going to take the same piece of paper while it's still folded. We're going to make a hot dog fold. A hot dog fold makes the paper long and skinny like a hot dog. So we're going to fold it a second time. Oh, way to go, Mrs. Laz-Art. We're going to fold it a second time, and that's going to give us a series of 4 rectangles, which I'm hoping are showing up nicely for you on the camera. It would be nice if you had a ruler to make a nice line for the dirt. I'm going to give you a little tip that's going to save you a lot of time. Don't put your line for the dirt in the middle like Mrs. Laz-Art did. I just spent 20 minutes having to color in all of that dirt, and it took me a lot of patience. So put your line down kind of towards the bottom of your paper. It's a horizon line or a horizontal line. Horizontal lines go from left to right. They start on one end of the paper. They finish completely on the other end of the paper. And we're going to color these in. Now you could color this anyway. The way I got my neat texture on mine is I simply made a series of circles. We usually like to make sure there are no white spots in our coloring. However, we're going to make an exception because this is what's known as creating a texture. A texture actually makes it look like it's either bumpy or smooth or prickly or wiggly, or that it has ridges. But of course, when I run my finger over it, it doesn't really. So that's actually known as visual texture. And through the power of the internet, I've actually got one that's complete. So after we finish coloring in this paper, we're pretty much done for this week. I will tell you this is the biggest task. Don't lose this paper. Take some magnets, stick it on your refrigerator up high where your little brother or sister can't get into it, and hang on to it. You do not want to lose this paper because it is so hard to color in all those little circles to make your plants. So, I have it optional on your worksheet. You do not have to go out and buy seeds or a pot or potting soil unless you yourself want to. So basically, I am going to have this all done for you. I have some snow peas that I'm going to plant in the one row. And in the other row, I'm going to plant some beans. And then once a week, for the next 4 weeks, maybe 5, depending, we're actually going to take a look at these plants. And I want you to pick either the snow peas or the beans out. And I want you to draw what we're seeing. I'm just going to push these seeds into the dirt. Oh, it's a great thing to get your hands dirty. So I highly recommend, if your parents have the time and you have a place to stick these little babies, I highly recommend growing some nice fresh vegetables. There's just nothing like growing plants. I love it. Okay, and I have to open my beans. By the middle of the summer, it doesn't even take the whole summer. By the middle of the summer, I'm going to have enough plants and they're going to be ready that I'll be able, in the beginning of August, to actually put in a second crop of these. And I'll have just a ton of beans and peas to share with my neighbors and my friends. And it's fun to watch them grow. I can kind of see why Beatrix Potter studied all these plants, because it is a neat thing to do. Okay, aside from watering them a little bit, which I already put some water into the soil, but aside from watering them a little bit, all we have to do is wait a week and these babies will start to sprout, and we'll have to wait and see exactly what happens. Okay, so it was really fun gardening with you today, and remember, take your time. You don't have to color that whole bit all at the same time. You can take a break, and I can't wait to see next week what our plants look like. We're going to have a good time drawing them each step of the way. This one will be next week's. This one will be the week after, and then the week after. And if you look at your worksheet, there's actually a phenology chart for tomatoes, but we'll have to see what our peas and beans look like, because they'll look totally different. Okay, it was nice talking to you. Have a great time doing your artwork. Bye.